everyone and welcome to another video on the Influenzo, the cheap Ferrari 308 that I bought unseen at auction just before, well, during lockdown. Now I may be smiling on the outside, but I can tell you that on the inside I am pretty devastated. In a sign of mourning, I've chopped off the moustache that I was growing. The sad thing is that in actual fact the car is still running really well. It starts well, it pulls well, it doesn't smoke, but there is something catastrophically wrong with it. It all started at the beginning of last week when I embarked on what should have been a maybe, I don't know, half an hour, 1 hour job. Let's just do a little recap because it will help to put what's happened to the car in context. So one night during lockdown, I was looking at the Silverstone Auctions website, looking maybe to get something cheap and cheerful that I could keep me interested during lockdown. And I'd seen this Ferrari. And then that very night, as I started looking, about an hour before the auction was due to go, I had a completely madcap conviction that I had to try and bid on it and try and win it. And that if it could go for a certain amount of money, and my top limit was 31, which was a good price for this, then I should buy it. And lo and behold, and to my complete shock, delight and horror, I actually won the car. I hadn't at that stage looked anything up. I didn't know the MOT history, I'd done no research. That night I was pretty panicked, and the next day I started to do some actual research on the car. I got hold of the place where it was being stored. I put some posts up on Ferrari forums and they gave me some more information, and what came back was mixed. Nothing disastrous, but it wasn't exactly reassuring. On delivery day, the car arrived on the back of a trailer and it had to be pushed into the garage because it wouldn't start. And from then on sort of began a litany of issues, which I was expecting. I had a look at various things. I looked for fuel, I looked for spark, and then I actually cleaned the distributor, which was really corroded. And the car actually started right up, and that was amazing. As soon as I took it for a run, the smoke cleared and I was on seventh heaven. I thought brilliant, but there was something still not quite right. And what it was, I found out later, was that it was only running on 7 of the 8 cylinders. I bought a new rotor arm, new distributor, convinced that that would sort out that problem. When I got the new distributor, I was just really flummoxed because it didn't make any difference. So I carried out a compression tests on all the cylinders, and by then it was looking like one of the cylinders was probably down on compression and there was going to be a need for an engine rebuild. I tested it and all the compression came up tops, and I was absolutely over the moon again. It was just brilliant. Now I checked loads of things and I couldn't figure out why that cylinder wasn't running, and finally I traced it to a loose idle jet holder in one of the carbs. The Influenzo then started running properly and I started to really fall in love with it. After 7 or 8 weeks doing work on it, I actually managed to make a video in which I talked about how it drove and how much I really liked it. At the beginning of last week, one of the other problems I had to attend to was a little weep in the engine bay. It was coming from one of the tubes, one of the pipes, going to the water pump. Let's just go back to that point and see how the story develops from there. Hello everyone and welcome to another video about the Influenza. It's not a great sign that you see me once again in my overalls. I'd fixed a water leak from the front, and I saw there was a little dribble coming from one of the pipes at the back. Only little drops, hardly anything. It was from the expansion tank to the water tank, and I just assumed that all I needed to do was change the tube, the pipe, as you would think. However, when I took that pipe off and tried to change it, I had a really unwelcome surprise, and that was that the union going into the water pump had actually corroded quite close to where it screws into the water pump. It was no longer just a case of just changing that tube, but I had to try and get that union out of the water pump. I tried to do it in situ, so I tried various ways, heating it up, I removed various bits around it. I did everything I could really, and it was a no-go. So in the end, I ended up sort of mullering that, really trying to get it out, and now the whole thing's ripped out, but the thread part is still in the pump body. So my only option is to take the the water, the water pump out. Luckily, that union is available from Ferrari, and I have ordered it. So there you go. There is what's left of that pipe. I've already removed the belt cover on one side. I need to get to that one, and to get to that one, obviously, the aircon unit has to come out, and it will stay out. So one of the good things about this happening is that I wanted to remove that anyway, because it just gets in the way. It doesn't do very much, and in future when doing belt changes and so on, it will be much easier without it. You will notice that I'm not in the Influenzo, and that is because I have finally got that water pump out, and I am heading to an engineering company to get what's left of the union out of it. So they're going to ream it out with a milling machine, taking care not to damage the threads. With regards to this particular car, I've only just got it, and it's a replacement for my M135i. I wanted something which was more fun and had more feel, old style. So I decided to swap it for this little tin can, which is a whole heap of laughs. Hello! The union has been taken out and the thread's been recut, and I'm just waiting for the part to arrive. I'm hoping it will arrive today. And then I can get back to putting it back together, then tracing the whistling noise. And then after that, the absolute next thing I want to do, my top priority, is the exhaust. Because I've heard one running with a different exhaust, and it's so much better than this. While we're at it, look at the mess. There's my garage at the moment, but here is the other part of the fuel pump. And I've just cleaned off the mating surface. I'm waiting for a new gasket for that as well. But we're slowly getting there. Hello! Well, today is a great day because the pump is back in the car. I've just got to finish a few bits. I've got to refill the coolant. I've got to mount a few more bits. And then, if everything is okay, we'll take it out. On a side note, this horrible little thing. It's unbelievable. It's so heavy. It must be well over 10 kilos, 10 to 15 kilos. Absolutely hated it and hated having to remove it, but just look now how much more room there is in there to work. It's just beautiful. When all this is done, I've decided that I am going to take that single exhaust out. I'm going to cut the top off, look at what the tubing is like inside, and then I will myself modify it and then get it welded back up, because it has to sound like a Ferrari. Pretty much ready to go, I think. So wheel liner back in, wheel, refill the cooling system, and then fingers crossed, and we'll go out and do that noise testing. At this stage I was actually quite happy. So yes, it had been a long hard slog, but the hard work was done. There was a sense of achievement there, and I was pretty pleased. All I had to do was refill the coolant in the system, and then I could start using the InfluEnzo again. As I refilled it, I realised that there was an air pocket trapped in the system, but that's okay. I thought, I'll take out the car. As it moves around and drives, it will get rid of that air pocket. So I went out, and indeed that worked. And when I opened the bleed valve at the top of the thermostat housing, water was coming out from there, so all good. However, I then opened the expansion tank to make sure it was topped up to the right level, and what I found was this. The dreaded milkshake is what happens when oil and water mix, and it tends to congregate, in this case, on top of areas like the expansion tank. It's really, really bad news. It means that oil is somehow getting into the cooling system. Now I've checked, there's no water going into the lubrication system, so the oil is clean, there's no water in the oil, so it's just the oil going through to the water. What I believe that means is that when I boiled over the car, and I was so delighted because I thought that I got away with it, I hadn't really. I think that the head gasket in one or both banks is now breached and damaged, and so is getting into the cooling system. So the question is, what do I do about this? At a very minimum, the head gaskets will need to be changed. It is possible to do it in situ, but apparently it's such a horrible, horrible, difficult job that it doesn't seem like it's the way forward. Really, it's an engine out job, on top of which, if the heads are then stuck in situ, and they can be almost impossible to remove, it's not something you want to do leaving the engine in the car. So I'd have to take the engine out. Now, in my single garage, there's no way I can do that. If I took it to a specialist, it would be several £1000s to get this done. On top of which, I've done everything myself so far, and I'd really like to resolve this on my own. So I don't know, I need to work out a plan whereby I can find a space where I can do this. The odd thing is, as I mentioned earlier, that the Ferrari actually still runs really, really well. It starts on the button, it pulls, it revs. It doesn't smoke from the back either. The only symptom at the moment is that there is oil in the cooling system, but still, that is pretty much an obvious symptom that something very major is wrong and needs to be attended to. But do I now regret getting this cheap Ferrari? They say you should never buy a cheap Ferrari. Well, no, I don't regret it. I still love it. And I think it was my fault really that it boiled over. I should have checked that the fans were working correctly. I should have kept an eye on the temperature, and if that hadn't happened, it would now be running all right, and I could be getting on with what I really want to do desperately, which is sort out that exhaust. Help me save the Influenzo. I have two asks for you guys really. The first is, please can you follow me on Instagram? So that's @number27vids. Secondly, I'm thinking about doing some Save the Influenzo t-shirts, and I wondered if there was any of you out there who was like a good designer or whatever who'd be willing to have a crack at having a go at a couple of logos for the t-shirt. I'm not going to set up a proper online shop or anything like that, it's just for a bit of fun. So Johnny at Classic Retrofit sent me this. They're really well known in the Porsche world for their fuse boxes, aftermarket fuse boxes, so believe it or not, the Porsche ones fail as well. And for their electric aircon units that they do, and he has supplied me this to test. Now obviously I've got bigger fish to fry at the moment with the Influenzo, but I will do this as soon as possible. I will fit it and see how it goes, but it looks really well made. I'm really impressed. It's got a little plexiglass cover, which is more a visual thing than anything else, because with these blade fuses you don't actually need that. And then you can see how the whole thing is built. It feels extremely solid. It's pretty heavy for what it is. And also, they have LEDs that show at the top that show when the fuse is blown. As a first contact, really, really impressed with that. Supplied with all the fuses and so on. And nice, looks like a nice quality item. And within the next couple of weeks, I'll try and fit it to the Influenzo, and we'll see where we go from there. And they're supplied in, again, black and white panels like the ones that we have in our cars, so keep an eye out for that. I've had a chat with Mike at QV in London just to get an idea, a ballpark figure of what it would cost if I just took the car as it was to a specialist. And of course the answer is quite a complex one because it depends on what is wrong with it. One thing that was quite interesting is he was intrigued that it appears to be only oil in the water and not the other way around. The oil seems quite clean, so on the dipstick and on the filler cap there's no smudge, there's no fudge, there's nothing going on there. So he thought that was really quite odd. He also said that normally it's quite rare for the gaskets to go on these cars. He boiled over his own car and got away with it as well. And normally, if they were to go for some reason, it would be like a crack or the head was warped or something like that, which again, fingers crossed. It is all repairable though, which is good. But I think the next thing I'm going to do, and that he advised, is flush the whole system and just run it again and see what happens. I think it's extremely unlikely that the Influenza is going to pull off another like Houdini trick and just turn out to have nothing wrong with it, but you never know. I need to do that. And basically just run some more diagnostics on the car and just see what is going on with that engine. So we end this week not on a high note, and I don't know, I'm okay with it. I'm philosophical about it. I will get it sorted out and it's all right, but it's not brilliant, right? Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it as always, and the adventures with the Influenzo just continue.